I'm just gonna get this out of the way early. Almost everyone in today's video is trash. This guy, trash. His mom, his homeboy, these guys who work for him, they're the entire landfill. Now, I know you're thinking to yourself, bro, hold up. You cannot just come on the internet and call somebody's mom trash. But honestly, that's where you're wrong. Nuance is a very valuable concept, but sometimes it's just more appropriate to simply be mad. And in today's video, I am big mad. I know this will come as a big surprise to many of you, but I personally am not the biggest sports guy. I don't really tune into games of foot basket or hockey ball. So you can imagine my surprise when the story that absolutely boils my blood the most recently came straight from the world of international soccer, and it is terrible, and I'm going to break it all down. This guy, Luis Rubiales, committed this totally unacceptable act against one of his players, Jenni Hermoso. Instead of resulting in his immediate firing, as it should have, these actions instead revealed that he has this weird sort of conspiracy of people around him who protect him and cover for him, ranging from his subordinates all the way up to his mom. Like, honestly, he and everything associated with him in any way whatsoever is just a mess. So before we get into all of that, let's take a moment to look at today's sponsor first. We're actually making a donation later in the video, which I could not have done without the sponsor. And honestly, I wouldn't really have gotten the sponsor if y'all weren't nice enough to watch the videos in the first place. So I guess today it's not just thank you to the sponsor, but thank you to you as well. Today's video is sponsored by unhinged. Quick question. How many people know your birthday? Your friends, your family? Well, as long as your friends aren't like me, because I can barely remember my own birthday. It was actually the day before yesterday. I'm 25 now. But you know who else might know? Data brokers. Thousands of companies who are taking your personal information, your date of birth, your employment history, your social security number, and selling it online. Now, while you could track down all that info and get companies to delete it yourself, that process could take years. But that is where Incognito comes in. First, create an Incognito account with your information. Second, give Incognito permission to contact the data brokers on your behalf. And third, sit back and watch as Incognito keeps you updated on everything from handling objections to successful removal requests. If you're ever wondering how you're getting emails from senders you've never seen, or how your information wound up in a data leak from a company you've never interacted with, data brokers are the reason, and Incognito is here to help. The first 100 people to use code D'Angelo will get 20% off Incognito. So go to incognito.com/D'Angelo and sign up today. Now, without further ado, let's get into this video. So, very short backstory. As many of you know, the FIFA Women's Cup is a huge international soccer tournament that takes place every 4 years. And after weeks of playing in this tournament, Spain had actually won the Women's World Cup for the first time in history. So naturally, people were celebrating, and rightfully so. The crowd was going wild, there were people all over the field. Like, everything should have been so fine. But unfortunately, one of the people on the field was this guy, Luis Rubiales, president of the Royal Spanish Football Federation, aka the RFEF. And amidst all the applause and celebration, for some reason, he decides to kiss one of the soccer players full on the mouth without her permission in front of the cameras and everybody. This understandably caused a huge uproar, as it should have, because what he did is gross. Like, by itself, it's just not appropriate, considering that he has this much authority over her as the president of the governing body over the sport that she plays. But what makes this far worse is that she did not, in any way, shape, or form, consent to be kissed by this man, and he just went for it anyway. On camera, no less. And here's the thing, I'm not going to play the clip in question. Obviously, I've seen it myself. It's circulating all over the place because the story has been blowing up. But even just a still image from the scenario shows how disturbing this is. Like, look at this. He just has this wildly aggressive grip on her entire head with both of his hands, and it's obvious what he's doing, even though it's obscure. You can even see her arms out, like, whoa, hold on. And in the video clip, you can see that the whole thing is exactly what it looks like. He just grabs her head, 2 hands, and pulls her towards him and plants a kiss right on her face. It's just a exceedingly gross action on his part, and it is very uncomfortable to watch. Can't even really imagine how uncomfortable it was to experience. And like, besides being objectively wrong, it's just a weird thing to do. Like, it was so weird that I feel like at the time, nobody even knew what to say, not even Rubiales and the player he kissed. But unfortunately, things are about to get a whole lot weirder. So the person that Luis Rubiales forcibly kissed is athlete Jenni Hermoso. She's obviously hugely talented and accomplished, and her skills paid off, hence the team's sometimes win. But in addition to that, I'd say she's also just very professional considering everything that happened. And to be clear, you don't have to be professional in this scenario. Like, we are way too obsessed with this perfect victim narrative where even if you are the one who was wronged, you have to be like really polite and be this innocent angel 24/7, or else society will discredit you and for some reason treat you far worse than the person who wronged you. Like, honestly, Jenni Hermoso had every right to lash out if that's what she chose to do, but I feel like the fact that she didn't says a lot about the difference between her and his demeanor. Shortly after the incident, Jenni said in an Instagram live stream with her teammates, referring to the kiss, "Hey, I didn't like it, but what do you do?" And I know it's a rhetorical question, but honestly, what do you do? I feel like sometimes you can just be so taken aback by an action that you don't even really have an opinion on it in the moment. Not yet anyway. Rubiales, on the other hand, had much stronger words to say, instead shrugging off critics during a quick interview. The kiss with Jenni? There are idiots everywhere. When two people have a minor show of affection, we can't listen to idiocy. I think the immediate problem with his characterization is this wasn't a two people sort of scenario. If she said that she didn't like it, this was a decision that he made and then forced upon her. So the next day, Rubiales actually apologized, though honestly, it was not much better. He didn't apologize to Jenni so much as apologize to the world for kissing her. Here we saw it as something natural and normal, but on the outside it has caused a stir because people have felt hurt by it, so I have to apologize. There's no alternative. He also apologized for calling people idiots, saying, "I want to apologize to those people. I'm sure they have their reasons. I'm also saddened because this is the biggest success in our history in women's football, the second World Cup that we've won, and this has affected the celebration." Again, I think this apology would have meant a little more if this was actually a consensual action, but in this case, Jenni actually came forward and sort of implied that maybe things weren't necessarily as bad as they seemed. "It was a mutual, totally spontaneous gesture because of the huge joy of winning a World Cup," she said in a statement to news agency EFE. "The Prezi and I have a great relationship. It was a natural gesture of affection and gratitude." So, I mean, seemingly that could have been the end of it. If what she was saying is true here, then the incident, while still very inappropriate, wouldn't have been as just deeply wrong as it seemed. But unfortunately, in this case, it was pretty much as deeply wrong as it seemed. Shortly after Rubiales' half-hearted apology, the soccer union Foot Pro gave a statement where they clarified their stance on events, as well as let Jenni set the record straight on what actually went down that night. And this time, she could not have been clearer. "I want to clarify that as seen in the images, at no time did I consent to the kiss that he gave me. They strongly condemn Rubiales' actions in no uncertain terms. From our union, we want to emphasize that no woman should feel the need to respond to the forceful images that everyone has seen. And of course, they should not be involved in non-consensual attitudes." The union went on to explain that everyone involved would refuse to play until Rubiales no longer occupied his position. "After everything that happened during the medal ceremony of the Women's World Cup, we want to state that all the players who signed this document will not return to a call of the national team if the current leaders continue. All 23 members of the winning team signed this document along with 58 other players, bringing the total number of signatures to over 80. But see, here's the thing. A lot of people like to use moments like this as some sort of gotcha, because they'll be like, wait a second, first she said that it was mutual, but now she's saying it wasn't consensual. But to do this is to act like it's just this completely unheard of concept to protect your abuser right when the abuse allegations come out. And this is not some sort of unheard of phenomenon. This happens. When rapper Tory Lanez shot Megan Thee Stallion, she initially covered for him because she was in shock and she didn't think anyone would believe her. But that didn't make it a lie when she came forward after the fact, and all these years later he wound up getting sentenced because he did in fact shoot her. Now obviously these are not the exact scenarios, but I bring it up because once again we're talking about this perfect victim narrative. No matter how much duress you're in because someone just sexually harassed you in front of everyone or shot you literally, you still have to give the perfect testimony right off the bat. You can't get anything wrong, you can't change anything, you can't lie to protect yourself or because you feel like no one would believe you. It's honestly so frustrating, and it doesn't change the truth of the matter. And the truth of the matter is she did not consent to that kiss with that man. And since she decided to come forward about this, Luis Rubiales totally lost it. Instead of apologizing, resigning like people wanted him to, or even just laying low for a little while, Rubiales decides to hold this unhinged press conference where he basically self-reports for like an hour about how willing he is to lie about things that have been caught on camera. So like obviously this clip is in Spanish, but I'm just gonna play you this part where he just starts chanting, "I will not resign." And then everybody at the press conference literally starts applauding him. Like it basically turns into some sort of weird fan rally, and you just have to watch it.
No voy a dimitir. No voy a dimitir. No voy a dimitir. No voy a dimitir. No voy a dimitir.
I'm sorry, but a man who sexually harassed one of his soccer players, refusing to take accountability for it, and then getting applauded by a room full of people who saw him do it. It feels like some sort of really messed up joke. Like, to be clear, there's no punchline. It's not funny. It just has that element where it's like, how am I supposed to take it seriously that this actually happened? I feel weird watching this, and so I can't even really imagine how it feels to be Jenny in this scenario. But Rubiales, my dear friends, was just getting started. If it wasn't enough to so blatantly refuse to take responsibility, he actually starts discrediting her and making her out to be a liar in front of everybody by trying to fabricate a story, despite the fact that the things he's saying in his defense are just easily disprovable from multiple camera angles. The kiss was consented. We had very affectionate moments. The moment Jenny appeared, she picked me up from the ground that we almost fell. And when she left me on the ground, we hugged. She took me up in her arms and we hugged. That did not happen. It just didn't happen. You can see in this video taken before the kiss, he puts his arms around her and then he just lifts his legs up, making it look like she's picking him up. Like, look, I'll play it again, and you can see he moves before she does, and then she sort of braces herself against the weight. And he's lucky, because I would have dropped him. But like, really, the fact that he's trying to make it seem like she initiated this is absurd, when he knew that hundreds of people were filming, so there's no way anyone would actually believe him, right? Except for the fact that everybody applauded him. And like, if you really just think about the structure of the narrative that he's building, he's literally just saying that she asked for it. Like, he's saying, oh, actually, she initiated contact. She picked me up. She consented. He's just saying that she wanted it. So in current day, modern age, we have this man who sexually harassed this woman, and then he proceeds to say that she wanted it. She consented, even though she said she didn't. He just knows. What is happening here? Besides trying to shift the blame on Jenny, he says that this whole thing is actually just a hit job from, and this is a new one for me, false feminism. Whoever sees the video will understand that in front of millions of people on television, in front of all the people who were there, the desire that I could have in that kiss was the same that I could have kissing one of my daughters. That is understood by anyone, and even those who are in the media. False feminism is a scourge. First of all, you should not be kissing her in the scenario at all, let alone without consent, let alone someone who is your subordinate in a context in which you are effectively at work. Like, the fatherly nature that he's trying to evoke here is completely irrelevant. And to blame this on not feminism, but fake feminism, it's just so nonsensical. I don't even really have a response for that. Like, the man is literally just saying words at this point. But yeah, those are just a few notable moments from an unforgivably long press conference in which he also informed us that a social murder was being carried out and that they are trying to kill him. Great to know that the president of the entire Royal Spanish Football Federation is, as mentioned, completely unhinged. And it turns out that the entire Royal Spanish Football Federation, yeah, they're trash as well. Because instead of choosing to distance themselves from whatever the heck his behavior was, they instead issued a statement in which they backed him up and threatened Jenny with legal action for coming forward. The RFEF and the president, given the seriousness of the content of the press release from Foot Pro Union, will initiate the corresponding legal actions. This is such a blatant and utter misuse of power by a federation in order to protect people coming out against the federation's leader. After this press conference, Rubiales tried to release this bombshell proof that actually Jenny was in the know the whole time. But like, the proof is literally just a video of Jenny laughing with her friends about the kiss sometime shortly after it happened, which doesn't prove anything at all. Compartmentalization is a thing. Things can be traumatic, but you can also be in certain scenarios where you're not necessarily expressing that. I feel like some people think just because you can't see things, it means they don't exist. It's like, between this nothing clip and his phony story about her lifting him up off the ground, nothing he says actually defends him. In fact, everything he says makes him look worse. So it's like, not only is he the worst kind of person, he's just not very smart. And as it turns out, the apple doesn't fall very far from the tree. Apparently, one of Rubiales' cousins confirmed that his mother went on a hunger strike, locking herself in a church to protest the unfair treatment of her 46-year-old baby boy. I'm gonna be honest, when I first read this, my brain completely refused to accept the possibility that this could be true. It doesn't even sound real. I was like, you know what? This is clearly just the cousin trying to get their 15 minutes of fame, right? Because whose mother would actually do that? And like, the cousin didn't exactly seem like a beacon of journalistic integrity. I mean, they also gave us this wonderful quote. The way they are treating him, the aggression, the feminists, the television, it seems to me shameful. So wait, was it feminism or false feminism? Are the feminists in the room with us right now? But no, as much as I desperately wanted this to be like an unsubstantiated tabloid rumor, unfortunately it got proven true because they actually found the church where she was staying at on the second day of her strike. It turns out his mom, Angeles Bear, wound up causing just a mini media circus in the middle of his hometown because people were scrambling to interview her, and Miss Bear was ready for her close-up. I don't mind dying for justice, she says in an interview. My son is a decent person and it is not fair what they are doing to him. She basically makes this self-imposed martyrdom into Jenny's issue as well, saying, I'll be here until my body holds on and I won't stop until Jenny tells the truth. It's worth noting that the very next day she ended her strike and went to the hospital because she said she felt dizzy. So I guess she actually wasn't willing to die for justice. And like, good, no one should be dying in this scenario, obviously, but the fact that his mother was so willing to not just overlook his behavior, but completely excuse it really shows how he wound up like this in the first place. And the fact that she managed to invalidate another person's suffering while somehow making herself the victim, like, it really explains a lot. It really explains a lot, because if you think about it, these are the exact same moves that he was making. He took a situation in which he was causing distress because he harassed somebody, and he's trying to turn it into this thing where he is now the victim of a completely imagined enemy that is false feminism or real feminism. I can't keep track. Now, at this point, everything just seemed like a gross media circus, and honestly like a mockery of Jenny's decision to come forward, because Rubiales had faced precisely 0 consequences for his actions. But even though so many top-level Spanish football personnel reacted in such a disgusting way towards Jenny's very rightful complaints, thankfully there's a level above the RFEF, and they are a lot more concise and a lot less litigious. FIFA, the host of the World Cup and the governing body of international soccer itself, quietly announced just 4 days after the incident that they would be opening disciplinary proceedings against him, as his actions may constitute violations of Article 13, paragraphs 1 and 2 of the FIFA disciplinary code. Now, if we take a look at this disciplinary code, we see that Article 13 references offensive behavior and violations of the principles of play, which sounds about right, and I would suspect that Rubiales most likely violated subsections A, B, and D of paragraph 2, namely violating the basic rules of decent conduct, insulting a natural or legal person in any way, especially by using offensive gestures, signs, or language, and behaving in a way that brings the sport of football and or FIFA into disrepute. And the only other comment they had besides that was that they basically had no other comment. The FIFA disciplinary committee will only provide further information on these disciplinary proceedings once it has issued a final decision on the matter. FIFA reiterates its unwavering commitment to respecting the integrity of all individuals and strongly condemns any behavior to the contrary. And that was all they wrote, in that update at least. But unlike the RFEF, it looked like FIFA was actually willing to do its job, because just 2 days later, they updated everyone again. The very next day, after Rubiales' embarrassing press conference, FIFA announced that he was actually suspended for 90 days from all football-related activities as the disciplinary proceedings continued. Besides just taking punitive measures against Rubiales, they also outlined some protective measures for Jenni Hermoso herself, ordering Rubiales to refrain through himself or third parties from contacting or attempting to contact the professional player of the Spanish national football team, Miss Jennifer Hermoso, or her close environment. They also extended this no contact order to the RFEF as well, and then they ended it with, yet again, one of the coldest closing lines I've ever seen in a corporate document. FIFA reiterates its absolute commitment to respect the integrity of all persons and therefore condemns with the utmost utmost vigor any behavior to the contrary. Last time, they just strongly condemned it. But this time, they condemned it with the utmost vigor. I'm pretty sure that's as close as you can get in corporate speak to saying, "You are big mad," and they were probably extremely embarrassed by his press conference and how he's making soccer look in general. Now, at this point, I think the Royal Spanish Football Federation realized that their decision to not only support Rubiales, but also threaten the person who came forward against him with a lawsuit probably fell right into FIFA's definition of things that they condemn with the utmost vigor. And seeing as FIFA equals their boss, it should come as no surprise, despite being incredibly two-faced and slimy, that they suddenly changed their tune overnight. The very first business day after FIFA handed out the suspension, they put out the following statement. After the latest events and the unacceptable behaviors that have seriously damaged the image of Spanish football, the president's request that immediately Mr. Luis Rubiales present his resignation as president of the RFEF. This came less than a week after they basically pledged their undying loyalty to him. The RFEF remains committed to continuing to implement its investment, as well as equality policies for the development of women's football. This is such a disingenuous thing to say when, again, less than a week ago, they were just threatening to sue a woman in their women's football division for coming forward about serious things that happened to her. So yes, I have no problem calling the RFEF trash, but unfortunately, it doesn't stop there. It's like, the more you look around, the more you realize how many people it took to enable this man's behavior. This problem has very deep roots. For example, the head coach of the soccer team that Jenni Hermoso was on, it's this guy named Jorge Vilda, and he spoke out against Rubiales after FIFA's decision as well. I regret deeply that the victory of Spanish women's football has been harmed by the inappropriate behavior that our, until now, top leader, Luis Rubiales, has carried out and that he himself has recognized. The statement is a little weird to me because it seems more apologetic to the victory that the team experienced than Jenni herself, but I guess at the very least, he did say that the behavior was harmful, which would be good, except for the fact that he's just lying through his teeth because he doesn't really think the behavior was harmful at all. See, you might have missed it, but let's go back to that weird applause moment from the press conference. And wouldn't you know it, there's Jorge Vilda himself clapping and nodding along with the rest of them. See, all this backtracking is actually indicative of a much larger issue, which is that some men vocally take a stance against mistreating women, not because they actually think it's wrong, but because they would get too much societal backlash for admitting the fact that they don't see anything wrong with it at all. It's just a completely self-serving kind of support that does nothing to actually support women and instead makes it way more difficult to detect scenarios where abuse is taking place because everything just seems like it's on the up and up since everybody is just so darn supportive. It's that exact kind of hidden enablement that allows the open secret situations that you see in so many of these scenarios. Like, everyone sort of knew, but nobody really said anything because they don't actually care. They just want the social benefits that come from appearing to care. In fact, there is one thing they do care about. Notice how both the coach and the RFEF statements mentioned how this situation was overshadowing the recent win. These people care more about the reputation of Spanish football than they do about the actual women on the Spanish football team. Like, no matter what they're saying or doing now, you cannot tell me that these people actually think there's anything wrong with what he did, because as trite as it is, actions do speak louder than words. And so despite their words, the RFEF's actions to threaten Jenni Hermoso with a lawsuit for coming forward against one of their own, that speaks louder than what they're saying now. And the action that Coach Vilda took to publicly support Rubiales at this unhinged press conference, that speaks a lot louder than the words he's now saying now that FIFA has passed down the suspension. And you know, one of the most frustrating things is they're not actually wrong about this whole controversy completely overshadowing Spain's win. If you Google Spain soccer right now, this is all that pops up. There are no celebratory articles, no interviews with the players, nothing on the front page at all except coverage of this man and what he chose to do that night. And then the absolute garbage storm that he and everyone around him decided to kick up afterwards. It's like they behave like children, but they have all the power of a grown man, and it's kind of frightening the more you think about it. Like, this is a 100% self-imposed problem, right? Obviously, the assault is the most grievous thing in this scenario, but also just the way that he's so willing to continue putting his foot in his mouth and making these disgusting statements and continually detract from the amazing victory that was his team's win also says a lot about just how gross of a person he is. Luis Rubiales is a bad person for a number of reasons, and he's finding new and myriad ways to disrespect the women's soccer team every single day. And for as much as they claim to care about how this is taking away from the players' achievements, the RFEF is no better. And if they hadn't made an absolute fool out of themselves by banding together behind him and even going so far as to threaten this woman, I don't actually think people would be as shocked by this story. Like, unfortunately, these things do happen, and what should have happened is that he was immediately dropped. But because we saw the complete opposite of what should have happened, the shock factor just totally blew up. And so now that's all anybody can think about when they think about Spain winning that cup. People are calling on Coach Vilda to resign, and in this case, I think he should. It's not like some weird guilt by association thing where you dared to exist around somebody who did something wrong. You were supporting that. And the person he wronged is one of your players. So why are you on the team? Now, while this scenario is definitely leaving me with a little less faith in humanity than I had before, I don't want to leave you thinking that everything is just totally hopeless. I've obviously been focusing mostly on these gross men who are doing their gross man thing, but it's worth noting that very many people were totally against this from the very beginning. There were actually protesters, rightfully, demanding that Rubiales step down in the street. And as for the sports world, Jenni Hermoso's teammates were not the only ones who stood behind her. Other women's teams showed support with signs and wristbands saying, "We're with you, Jenni." Even men's teams were out on the field with signs saying, "We are Jenni," and shirts saying "It's over," referring to Rubiales' time as president. And it's things like this where even though you hate the context, you at least love to see the support. And as for me, I have nothing but support for Jenni Hermoso. I think the way that people are standing up for her around the world is kind of what I wish I could see for all people who are victims of abuse or assault or harassment. Obviously, nobody should ever be abusing, assaulting, harassing people in the first place, and that is the real issue. But another huge issue is that unfortunately, not everybody is sort of treated the same way as Jenni has been after these incidents occur. Like, thankfully, her very prominent position as a star player on a team that just won the world championship, that's brought a huge spotlight to the scenario that she was thrust into. But these things often happen to people who are completely out of the spotlight and have no means or platform of really speaking out against their abusers the way that Jenni was able to via her official statement from the union. In addition to knowing about her story, people believe Jenni about her story because this was caught on camera. There's no real way of interpreting the footage other than exactly what happened. But unfortunately, in these scenarios, things are often a lot harder to prove, and they're not exactly as cut and dry as what we saw happen here. So people wound up getting discredited and disbelieved because of it, with many even finding themselves being blamed for their own mistreatment. So while I am very grateful to be able to use my platform to speak up in support of Jenni, I wouldn't want to just get attention on this video without also acknowledging the many untold number of women and other people who are in abusive scenarios and maybe don't have the same resources that we've seen in this situation. But that doesn't mean there's nothing we can do. There are organizations like the National Sexual Violence Resource Center that provide services designed to connect people with the help they need in these situations. And I was fortunate enough to get this video sponsored, so I'm going to be donating $3,000 from that sponsorship to the NSVRC. Donations are not the end-all be-all, because the real way to solve this problem is for people to stop harassing and assaulting and abusing other people in the first place. But there are people who need help right now, and that help takes resources. And so if I'm able to sort of help with those resources, I see no reason why I shouldn't do so. I would also ask you to help in any way you can. And again, that does not just mean donations. Even just being there for people goes a very long way, whether that's through volunteering for a helpline or even just listening to people who come forward. Anyway, part of what makes all of this just feel so disturbing in the back of my mind is like the intensely uneven power dynamic between Rubiales and Jenni Hermoso. It's not like this was done by a fellow player, which would still be completely unacceptable, or done by her coach, which would still be a power imbalance. This was done by the president of the entire organization that is Spanish soccer. It's like this man was just determined to overnight embody everybody's idea of like a creepy guy who abuses his position of power to take advantage of female employees. And he was determined to do this loudly in front of everybody and to get away with it. And for a scary second there, it kind of seemed like he was going to. But actions do have consequences. And as of this week, a criminal investigation has officially been launched. So I can only hope this all quickly arrives at a just resolution without causing too much distress distress to the victim of Rubiales' actions. And at this point, it really is sort of just in the hands of the authorities. Overall, Luis Rubiales, his mother Ángeles Bear, head coach Jorge Vilda, and every single member of the Royal Spanish Football Federation are trash. This video is just like a new personal best for how many garbage human beings are being discussed at the same time. And so I am honestly glad it's over. Anyway, thank you for the support. Thank you for watching if you happen to make it this far. And as always, can't wait to see you in the next one. Bye.